Well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? That's what everyone wants to do. We never really stop, right? There's always a congress, there's always a deadline, there is always something that you're working towards, and you never really take a step back. You never really get time to review any of your campaigns and say, well, this went really, really well. Why is that? What did we do? Or this went really, really bad. Why is that? What did we do?
There's probably an AI solution for that, I'm sure there is.
I just love it. I love it.
So it's not all about product and 3 key messages. It's a whole terminology around marketing, promotional, non-promotional, and then medical.
When people are being territorial about workload, about projects, about concepts, that's when you're on really rough ground. And
yeah, a good question actually. No one's asked me that before. Okay.
This is my job. Like, I would not let that through. Like, I would not allow that meeting, and I would not allow these materials and all of these things. And I was just thinking, my role and the role of a final signatory and the role of somebody who supports and advises on how to promote correctly is just so incredibly important.
Coming in early to the career, you kind of are susceptible to whatever it's like at that point, so you just got to understand that you can change things.
Historically, medical had been seen as more of a support function. People who have moved into the industry have said that they've moved to the dark side. There's definitely a place for AI within the review of material. Sometimes they're going to need information from an MSL. Sometimes they're going to need information from a rep.
Okay, another $1 million question.
You will achieve what you need to achieve in your own time. I just remembered kind of my own journey of trying to get into the pharmaceutical industry, and it was just awful. With covering so many therapy areas, you need to understand.
Welcome back for another episode of Final Form with me, Amish Patel. Thank you so much for tuning in. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Gina Bariah, Global Medical Director at GSK. Gina is a dynamic industry leader with extensive experience in medical affairs and product lifecycle management. She's known for mentoring teams and improving copy approval processes. Gina also excels in designing omnichannel strategies across both medical and commercial. Gina is also the founder of PharmAffinity, a community platform designed for helping professionals develop their career within the industry. So Gina, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I want to get straight into it, if that's okay, and just ask you pretty much around your role as a global medical director at GSK. Now, that job title in itself can mean a lot of things in different companies. So I'd like to find out for you in your specific situation, what does that mean? What is the vision for that role? And what does that look like on a day-to-day basis for what you actually do?
Yeah, so you're right. Role titles vary from company to company, even sometimes within the company. So as a global medical director at GSK, my role is very heavily focused on, at the moment, it's very heavily focused on review and approval and supporting medical and commercial strategy. So I do a lot of advising. I do a lot of promo mat reviews, so that takes up a lot of my time, but at the global level. So we're kind of designing the overarching strategy that will be disseminated to the local affiliates, and at the moment I'm working very much in pipeline. So the products that I look after, and I look after quite a few, all sit within pipeline. And that's kind of what my role is at the moment. I'm looking after, like I said, a number of different therapy areas. I have liver, neurology, I have vaccines, I have, there's a real mixture of different therapy areas, but all, like I said, within the pipeline side of things. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, okay, wow, that is very extensive in terms of the areas that you look at. And actually pipeline is an interesting one because there are a lot of companies looking at pipeline products right now. There's a lot actually going on. So that actually leads me to my next question, especially with what you just described there in terms of, like, I guess the range of things, different therapy areas you're looking at. I guess within the last 12 to 18 months, then actually, what specific challenges have you had, and I guess how have you approached them?
So I'd say my main challenge is the fact that I cover so many therapy areas. And with covering so many therapy areas, you need to understand the landscape, right? So you need to understand the patient landscape. So what are the issues for the patients? You need to understand the competitor landscape. So are there any other competitors in the market? Are they also in pipeline? Have they been approved? And then you need to understand all of your studies. So within 4 different therapy areas, it's quite a lot to have to get your head around. So that's always kind of my biggest challenge, is that when I'm working and I'm kind of chopping and changing, because the workload comes when it comes. It's not I have one day in hepatology, one day in vaccines, one day in neurology. It's kind of every day I'm covering all of these different therapy areas. So yeah, I'd say that's my biggest challenge, is just making sure that I can consume all of the information that I need to consume in order to be able to do my job.
Yeah, okay. And so I guess how do you manage that then? Like, because also like you mentioned there around like it's not like a day blocked out for each thing, and so actually you're switching headspace, I imagine, quite a bit from maybe hour to hour or half day to half day. So how do you kind of manage that and stay on top of that?
Yeah, so I think I've been quite fortunate, really, because it's kind of been step by step addition. So I started off with one therapy area, kind of got to know that, then another one came my way, and then I got to spend a little bit of time getting to know that, then another one, and then another one. I think the last two kind of came simultaneously. So yeah, the vaccine and neurology kind of came at the same time, but they are kind of very early in the pipeline, so there's not as much information. So kind of as a product goes through its life cycle, you get more and more information on that product. You have more and more studies, you have more and more data. And at that point, kind of 5 years after launch, you've got loads of information to consume. But when it's quite early on in pipeline, you only have a handful of studies that you need to really understand. And some of the areas that I'm working in, there's not really that many competitors, or the competitors are in a similar stage of the life cycle. So again, not as much as you would expect kind of 5 years post license.
Yeah, okay, interesting. And so I guess in terms of where you're working at the moment, then who are the, I guess, other functions that you're predominantly working with?
So to be honest, it's mainly medical affairs.
Hmm.
When it's you kind of work very closely with your R&D counterparts, um, but it's really medical affairs that drives the strategy during pipeline.
Yeah, okay. And when do you think, in terms of when you get nearer to launches, I guess, what kind of time period do you start connecting with, I don't know, commercial colleagues, etc.?
Um, I'd probably say around phase three. Around
Hmm.
phase three, kind of when you know that you're going to be submitting for marketing authorization, you've got like things are moving in that direction, then you start having to work quite closely with your commercial counterparts, and they start building out the kind of sales teams and things like that in the locks, and then you would be developing training materials as well for those.
And I think you mentioned as well previously when we've spoken as well, you've worked, I guess, across the whole life cycle. So I guess I want to switch it back because the audience that are listening today will be a mixture of commercial and medical. So in those instances where you have worked on a product which is out there, it's got marketing authorization, whether it's again just before launch or post, etc. Like, how has your working relationship been with the marketing team, sales teams? I guess have you seen that change over time? Could you tell me a bit more about that?
I think it varies from company to company,
Mm.
and it's very heavily driven by company culture.
Hmm.
So I've worked at companies where medical's not had a so in affiliates, so within the country, where medical's not had a budget. And so they've had to, for any projects that they've wanted to do, they've had to go to their commercial counterparts and ask for the money. And if you come in to a role after all the budget's been assigned and you've done all your budget planning, and there isn't any money, it can be quite tricky to navigate those types of conversations to say, well, X, Y, and Z hadn't been budgeted for in the medical plan, and now we're trying to ask commercial for some money to do some medical activities. So there are different scenarios, I guess, where you'll have different interactions with between medical and marketing. But on the whole, I'd say that it's been really positive. I think medical and marketing have a great working relationship. I think it's very synergistic. I think that both support each other to achieve their goals. And it's, yeah, I think when you work in those companies where there is a good working relationship between the two departments, then you have a really good kind of overall cohesive strategy. And I think you get the most out of it. You make the most impact.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess it sounds like you've had a good experience there. Is there anything practical you could share in terms of what does that look like, I guess, on a day-to-day basis, what a good relationship looks like?
Yeah, do you know what? I think it's sitting in on each other's plans. So when you're developing the medical strategy, it's about informing your stakeholders, right? It's about working together. And the same goes for the commercial side. So when you're developing your commercial strategy, it's about speaking to your medical counterparts. It's about saying, well, do you want to come along to this brand plan? And making sure that there is good communication between both teams and both departments. I think that is going to be the key to driving a good relationship.
And have you seen, I guess, have you seen it where it's not as good? And I guess what that looks like as well, so people can maybe spot some of these things early on and maybe course correct as needed.
Yes, yes. So I have seen sometimes where, you know, there are certain activities, and I think sometimes, when we classify activities as promotional and non-promotional, then it can get a little bit tricky because sometimes medical teams will be saying that is a non-promotional activity. It belongs with medical. Medical are going to own that piece of work, and medical are going to deliver on it. Um, and sometimes I think commercial may want to do something that's non-promotional, right? They might want to do something that is generally thought of as a non-promotional activity, but they may want to do it in a promotional way. So I think that's when it can get a little bit tricky. That's when I think when people are being territorial about workload, about projects, about concepts, that's when you're on really rough ground and you need to be able to work together as a team because you you still want the same outcomes, right? It's still about bringing bringing benefit to the patient, bringing medicines for the patient. So it's still the same end goal, and it's better just to work together, um, rather than try and tussle over who owns what kind of work stream.
Yeah, a couple of interesting points you mentioned there. Definitely around like the that shared kind of goal. Everybody, if you're doing things correctly, you are trying to achieve that one goal essentially, which is to get that appropriate information out there to healthcare professionals. Essentially, make sure that they can make an informed choice for their patients. The other point you mentioned there, which is an interesting one, I've talked about this recently with people as well, quite over and over really, which is about actually that whole categorization of promotional and non-promotional. And I guess it's probably the ABPI code really that kind of has cemented that kind of understanding. And as you said, I when I used to be in a marketing in a brand team in a marketing role, I used to do a lot of activities which weren't brand related, but they were seen as promotional just because of the function that I was in. But actually, if you're doing good marketing, everything isn't about your product. There's a lot more you can do as well, and so kind of the whole terminology around marketing, promotional, non-promotional, and then medical, it's a tricky one, and I think yeah, I've not seen wide scale that navigated correctly before. So that's an interesting one.
It can be difficult to get it right, but like I said, with good communication,
Mm.
teamwork, then it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, and I guess on both of those points, and around the good experiences, the bad experiences, I guess, how have you seen that extend to externally to essentially customers who are then potentially, if it's a bad experience, getting disjointed experiences from one company, different functions, especially if you've got multiple teams in a portfolio kind of setting as well. I guess, have you seen that aspect of things and used that to almost inspire the good?
So I guess I have seen it externally as well, and I think sometimes you see it a lot with with reps and MSLs
Hmm.
as to who owns which relationships with which healthcare professionals. And that can be, again, really detrimental, right? If you're fighting over a healthcare professional and saying, no, this is my healthcare professional, I own the relationship. It's not really about that. It is about like you said, making sure that the healthcare professional gets the information that they need. Sometimes they're going to need information from an MSL. Sometimes they're going to need information from a rep. And really, it's about working together to make sure you can identify who is most appropriate to deliver the information that the healthcare professional needs.
Yeah, 100%. Also, in terms of the data as well, sometimes when you're not communicating and the data is also siloed and kind of gated as well, you kind of have no idea what's going on. You're almost hearing from the customer to be like, oh, yeah, I spoke to so and so recently. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I should probably know that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that puts people on a bit of a back foot because they want to be seen as someone who can instill confidence. But when a healthcare professional is telling you that they've seen other people in your company and you don't know about it, sometimes that can feel a little bit disorientating.
Yeah. So I want to switch it to, you mentioned earlier on a big part of your role is around copy approval, and so you're seeing a lot of content come your way, and the pharma industry as a whole, I've experienced it. I see it now in terms of the content. Is sometimes by the time you get out to the customer, it's kind of a bit too, it's very product centric. It's not really that inspiring sometimes, and sometimes it's kind of the same, regurgitated almost in multiple channels, right? So I guess you see content. It'll be interesting to know kind of at what point you see content as well in that whole development journey.
Yeah, so I think it varies. It varies from team to team. So some teams will pull me in super early, at concept stage, at like I said, at brand plan, when they're developing their plan for that brand for the rest of the year. So when they're thinking what campaign do they want, they're thinking what kind of messaging that they want, and they'll bring medical in at that point. So nothing has been created, nothing has happened. You're just talking about it and you're building the concept. Um, Other times, teams will have done everything. They'll have done everything and it'll just be in my in my queue ready for approval. That'll be the first time that I see it. Um, so it really just depends. It really depends. And I think it I think it depends on your ways of working, and you'll have different ways of working with different teams. Because for some teams, I will say, yes, I'd like to come in at concept stage. I'd like to come in really early and really understand what you're wanting to do because we haven't got anything at the moment. This is, we're creating everything from scratch. Other times, we will have done a brand plan and it's maybe just like a little refresh. And so I'm not too worried about kind of what they're going to want to do and the types of messaging that they're going to want to use and the type of data that they're going to want to use. It's going to be more around, it's a little bit of a refresh. I probably don't need to come in that early. And I'm happy to kind of see it a little bit later. Um, and other times, like I said, I don't even know about it until it's in my queue, and then I have to circle back to the person and say, "Can you give me a little bit more information on this job bag?" But
Yeah.
yeah,
And is that a request, I guess, for more information, more from the lens of trying to just understand, I guess, what it's about, how it's going to be used, or is it from a, I guess, from a perspective of actually you're a pharmacist, aren't you, by trade essentially? So you're almost looking at it from a customer lens to be like, actually, is there something that I would like to receive? I like to be on the end of, and actually, can I give some input as to how you could make it better, for example?
yeah. So I think when I'm having those discussions at concept stage, definitely I'm looking at it from both an ABPI perspective, but also a healthcare professional perspective. I'm looking at it from as many perspectives as I can. I guess when it comes to me, and they've pretty much done it, and they've spent all their budget on getting it designed, on creating this. I very rarely will go in and say, as a healthcare professional, I think you should do X, Y, and Z. Take it back to your creative agency and start again. Like, I would not do that. I would never do that. The only time I would ask for any changes is if it didn't meet our regulations, if it was a breach of the code. So sometimes I just need a little bit more information. So usually they will have completed the metadata in promo mats. So the audience should be there, the description should be there, everything should be there for me to be able to sign it off. But sometimes, some information is missing, or it's not really that clear, or it can be, in the description they've said it's going to be at a congress, and then in the channel they've put email or something. So I might just need a little bit of clarity as to how it's actually going to be used. Um, But yeah, I would only if it gets to that point, really, I'd only ever ask any changes if it contravened the code.
Yeah, and I guess it depends, doesn't it, in terms of like, yeah, who the originator is, who is the person on the other side of that content as well, in terms of their experience. Because like going back to mine, like some of the best experiences I had was when I worked, yeah, very early, as you described, with my kind of medical counterpart actually, because I valued their opinion because they are closer to the end customer than some data I'm seeing that I'm kind of like using to build it, right? So I guess it depends on that person as well as to, yeah, how close are they to the customer? Because sometimes that data that marketers use often isn't great, or it's out of date, or it doesn't really gather any insight from it. So yeah, I guess in a perfect world, then trying to pull some of that together, if Pharma is trying to create the best content, tools, services, etc. out there, what does that look like from an internal perspective? Like, what, how do people need to work together to achieve the business need, yet also achieve the healthcare professionals' needs as well, and make some content inspiring, so it's not all about product and three key messages essentially.
Yeah, so well, that's the million dollar question, isn't it? That's what everyone wants to do. Everybody's looking to create the best content, the most engaging content. And I think sometimes it's about giving people the space. It's about giving your marketing and medical colleagues the space to do that blue sky thinking, to really just think outside the box and come up with something that is needed but is a bit different. So I would say that because a lot of the time, what I've seen is that we never really stop, right? There's always a congress, there's always a deadline, there is always something that you're working towards, and you never really take a step back. You never really get time to review any of your campaigns and say, well, this went really, really well. Why is that? What did we do? Or this went really, really bad. Why is that? What did we do? And then you never really get to even when you're doing brand plan, it's usually in your office in a windowless kind of room where you've got like sticky notes or a whiteboard or whatever, but it's still not great for creativity. I get some of my best ideas when I'm out on a walk or when I'm just completely relaxed and I'm not having to really think about having to do something. So I think a little bit more of that might help, but together, because again, it's siloed, right? Sometimes medical will do like, I don't know, 3 days away, and marketing will do 3 days away, and no one really does anything together to come up with some really, really kind of unique concepts.
Interesting. So do you do that in your role? Do you have like those days away actually together or?
So it's a little bit more tricky when you
Hmm.
get to the global level because your teams are everywhere, right?
Hmm.
Different countries. So it can be a little bit more tricky to get everybody together in person um, at a specific location.
Hmm.
It can be a little bit harder. We do try, but it is a little bit harder. I think it's a lot easier to do in kind of country affiliate level.
Yeah. Okay, another million dollar question, because you mentioned it earlier in terms of that you need that space and the creativity to get that creativity even as an individual, right? With a big to-do list which is always growing, etc. So yeah, the million dollar question, how do you create space to do that, to have some time to think?
Um, I think it comes down to company culture and team culture. So there have been teams that I've worked in where they have kind of religiously taken time out to reflect and to look forward. And they've done that as kind of the whole team, not even just medical and marketing, but sometimes it's medical, marketing, market access, just some of those really core people in the team just coming together and having some time to just think about, right, what have we done? How has that worked? What do we want to do? What do we want to achieve? And doing some kind of team building to just allow that creativity to flow. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's switch gears now then a little bit. Because you've worked in the farm industry for quite a while now. I guess what I'd like to know is what keeps you in the farm industry, first of all, and I guess in terms of your current day to day, what motivates you, and then I guess going forwards as well. Is there anything specifically that you're excited about, that you're looking forward to kind of happening within the industry?
So what keeps me in the industry? I just love it. I love it. I love the variety. I love that I get to be part of bringing medicine to a patient. I get to be part of that journey. Um, and it's just for me, it's just really rewarding. It's just really rewarding to be working in the pharmaceutical industry, to be supporting the development of medicines, to be supporting the licensing of medicines, and then to be supporting the correct promotion of medicines. And maybe it's like super geeky of me, but I watched oh, is it what's it called? Pain.
Oh, I know what you mean. The series, the drama series, right?
No, it was a movie with Emily
Oh,
Blunt. Oh,
oh,
Pain Hustlers.
Pain
Pain
Hustlers.
Hustlers.
Okay.
I watched that, and it was about fentanyl, and it was
Hmm.
about the selling of fentanyl in the US and how it was promoted and sold to healthcare professionals in just so many wrong ways, right? So it was all the studies had been done for patients who were kind of end stage cancer patients for,
Hmm.
for pain management, for palliative care. And they were trying to get their medicine used in all other types of pain, but obviously fentanyl is incredibly addictive. So you're getting patients that were getting addicted to the pain medicine. And also, I was watching this movie, I was thinking, this is my job. Like, I would not let that through. Like, I would not allow that meeting, and I would not allow these materials and all
Hmm.
of these things. And I was just thinking, yeah, how much my role and the role of a final signatory and the role of somebody who supports and advises on how to promote correctly is just so incredibly important.
Yeah, it's an interesting one as well, actually, because I think I watched well something similar. I think it was a TV series called Dope Sick. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, but
Um,
somebody did tell me about that.
Yeah, and similar thing. I think I was still in the industry then, like in-house as well, where like I was thinking about that. Like when I was out before I even joined the pharma industry, like I didn't really know much about it. And then coming into it now, obviously you know so much more having worked in different places and knowing different things. But actually, from still those people, that friends, family, etc., that don't know anything about it, they only kind of know what's on the news, what's in the media, etc. They sometimes may think that it's still like that. So I guess do you like I try and educate them as much as possible in whatever ways I can. So this is a little bit off topic, but I wonder, yeah, do you also have the same feeling, and how do you educate people that maybe have similar opinions of the industry as a whole?
Um, I've very rarely come across anybody outside of the industry who has that perception or
Hmm.
who has made that perception known to me.
Hmm.
Usually, what I get are people who have moved into the industry who've said that they've moved to the dark side.
Yeah, I've
And
heard that quite a bit.
and it's usually people who have been doctors or pharmacists in
Hmm.
the NHS and then moved into medical and they said, I moved to the dark side. And sometimes that kind of hurts because I'm like, I don't think this really is the dark side. I don't like we're all here to do the same thing, right? We're all here for the patient. That's why we're here. That's why we went to university. That's why we got our degree. That's why we went into this type of profession. And you're doing the same thing in industry. You're doing, everything you're doing each day is for that patient. Making sure that the patient voice is heard, making sure that what you're producing is of a high quality, making sure that what you're communicating with your healthcare professionals is correct, it's fair, it's balanced. So yeah, I don't actually get it very much from people who aren't in the industry. It tends to be from those people who have recently moved over. But I'd like to think that after they spent a little bit of time doing the role, they stop saying that they've moved to the dark side.
Yeah, it's interesting when I have heard that comment, I guess between medical professionals said, and I've it's kind of said in a jokey banter way, but as you've said, actually, yeah, words can have a different meaning to different people, even if from the surface it is quite jokey. So yeah, no, I'm glad you kind of called that out and actually shared kind of some stories around that. Um, so I guess going forward, actually, yeah, what does excite you about the future? Is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to within what the industry could achieve, or maybe something that's impacting your role, the industry, etc.? Yeah.
So I think AI is having a huge effect
Hmm.
on absolutely every single industry, and I don't think that the pharmaceutical industry is any different there. I think that AI is going to change our industry massively. Um, I think there's definitely a place for AI within clinical trials. There's definitely a place for AI within the review of materials, to make kind of the final signatory's life a little bit easier. That some of the more easy to correct mistakes could probably be caught by AI. But yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of changes coming into the future.
Yeah, interesting that you said AI for copy approval actually as well, because this is something I've been talking to people about as well, and I've seen. I think it was Pfizer that publicly released something. I don't know what country it was
Huh.
in. It might have been US maybe, where they've got a system which then flags materials in a red, amber, green state. To kind of, I imagine it's kind of red is a human needs to take a serious look at this, and green is kind of like, yeah, maybe fine. I don't know the details, but yeah, interesting that. Do you think there's a space then for copy approval to like let an AI based copy approval to almost let something fully pass through? Is there still an element where a human would need to look at something to give it that final stamp, regardless of maybe what the code says right now, because that obviously needs to evolve in that space as well. But
I think it can be tricky. I think it can be tricky because the information is, well, AI is only as good as the information that it can learn from. And there is, there's human error, but then there's also human judgment and perception and all of these other things that go into approving something. So something can just be in bad taste or in poor taste. And AI might not be able to recognize that because it adheres absolutely completely to the code. But you look at it and you think, this is not going to land well with healthcare professionals, and it is not going to be what resonates with prescribers. So I think there's still going to need to be a human factor to it. And I think that's probably one of the reasons. And I spoke to somebody recently about this, about kind of having a standardized written exam for the code, where usually what you'd have is maybe part of it is a written exam, but a lot of it is a viva, where you're talking about how you review things, what your considerations would be, what your concerns would be, and AI can't really do that.
yeah, I agree as well. And there's so much to it, and still trying to learn so much, and also the code might take a while to kind of get up to that level as well. Still probably not to the point where everything digital is kind of clear as well, still within the code as to how to do it. Because I still work with a lot of signatories, a lot of different clients I work with, where different signatories within the same company will apply kind of things,
Exactly.
their own understanding of it. So yeah, it's a multifaceted thing, and I'm kind of excited to see where that goes. So I guess on that as well, very much linked to that AI, I guess, how do you stay up with what's going on with AI, what's going on with latest trends in your area? You've already talked about the different multiple therapy areas that you work in. You've got a busy life. You're trying to create space as well at the same time. Like, how do you keep up with that kind of stuff to make sure you're still at the cutting edge and adding value to your job?
Yeah. So kind of, when I say social media platforms, I actually do use LinkedIn quite a bit.
Hmm.
I follow a lot of different people who talk about uh, talk about the code, maybe some thought leaders in different therapy areas as well. So sometimes using social media, sometimes I'm just using connections. So I will just have a conversation with my colleagues and we will just talk about what's happening. But really, it's just a variety. The PMCPA e-alerts, sign up to those. Um, but yeah, it's just a variety. I think in this day and age, information is at our fingertips all the time. Um, so it's not difficult to get the information. I think it's about being able to consume it and to be able to remember where you read it as well. So the amount of times that I'm like, oh, I know that, and I've read that somewhere, but where did I read that? Because I want to refer back to it. I think that's always quite tricky.
Yeah, there's probably an AI solution for that. I'm sure there is. Um, It sounds like, yeah, two of those examples you mentioned there with kind of social media and also just chatting to people. It sounds like there's a bit of a link there in terms of like you're almost curating your feed, whether that's online or in person, with people that you trust. And almost they're almost your filter to the masses of information out there. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, yeah, I'd say so. Because most of the time I want to know the relevant information, right? The information that's important for me at that time, and that's
Hmm.
going to be the information that's important to my team. So if they're telling me about something, then it's probably something I need to know.
Yeah, exactly. So that's probably an important one as well for people to know is actually make sure you're getting the information from the right people, so that you know you can trust it as well. Curating that feed to people you trust, but also their expertise as well.
Yeah, and I'd say making sure that you prioritize that relevant information
Hmm.
because that's going to be what you need to do your job.
Yeah,
But sometimes it can be fun just to kind of read around as well.
yeah. When you got that space.
Exactly.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so kind of linking forwards then as well. So people, there's a lot of people that are moving roles. I moved a lot of roles within the industry as well. There's people maybe looking to join the industry. Um, so I guess a couple of questions I usually ask people. One is around, I guess, what advice would you give to someone who's joining the industry? I guess in what would you want them to do in week one? Maybe something you would have hoped someone would have told you, for example. So that's the first part of the question.
So I guess that's a super broad question because I guess it depends what role they're going into as well. But I would
Hmm.
say week one, regardless of role, try and get to know your team and your extended team. Try and make those connections, those networks. I mean, I still get a lot of information from my network, as I've already said, and so that's where I'd say that you'd get the majority of your information is going to be from your team and your extended team. So start making those connections, start building those relationships right from the beginning.
Yeah, nice. And this might be the same answer actually, potentially. I guess what about because you've had that jump from working in a local country to then moving to global? Is anything maybe different to that that you'd advise someone who's making that jump for the first time?
I guess so. It depends because I made that transition during COVID. So it was very different way of working. Everybody was working from home, so there was no face-to-face interaction. So that wasn't, I guess, it wasn't something that I missed or felt like I was missing out on because nobody had it. So all of our calls were virtual. You'd have a virtual cup of tea with somebody. And so I didn't really feel as though I had missed out on building any of those connections. Now it's more of a hybrid way of working. You know, more people are going into the office. There are a lot more kind of face-to-face touch points. And I guess if I moved into a global role now with um, with people that are in different countries, not necessarily in the office, it might feel a little bit isolating as well because your immediate team isn't there in the office with you, but you can still make connections with your extended team. And I think making connections and networking within your company is so important just from being able to do your job because a lot of the time you'll want to go to people and ask them how to do X, Y, and Z, but also for your career. When you want to move to that next role, it might be somebody within your network, within your company that can help recommend you or can connect you to the hiring manager or can help upskill you for your next move. So I think making sure that you're utilizing that opportunity within your company is really important.
Yeah, I think that's a massive point. Like network is huge. I think, like you said, like moving if you've got aspirations to move to different roles, actually it's probably too late by the time you've seen a job posting. So there's probably someone already in line for that because they've done the right kind of had the right kind of conversations, have built the right network, and made clear to people as well as to like maybe what they're looking for in their next role and what their skills are as well. So I always found that as well. Similarly, when I was moving roles, as to actually by the time it's been posted, it's probably too late. You want to be top of mind when someone's already thinking about putting a job posting out there, for example. So I guess thinking about professional development. So obviously you are the founder of PharmAffinity. I wonder if you could share a bit more about that because I'd love for people to hear about that a bit more.
Yeah, so I developed Pharmafinity because I just remembered kind of my own journey of trying to get into the pharmaceutical industry, and it was just awful. I had so many rejections. I had absolutely no idea of the different types of roles, or what they entailed. So, yeah, I created PharmAffinity. It's a platform with lots of resources on the different types of roles within pharma, resources on the ABPI code, resources on how to network, and we also run networking events. So we try to do 4 a year. Sometimes it's only 3. But we try and do them regularly throughout the year so that people can come along, meet people who are already in industry and learn from them. But it's not only for people who are looking to move into industry, it's also for people who are in industry wanting to grow their careers. So I actually had a call today with somebody who is a medical manager, and they're looking for their next step. So they were asking me what they can do, and if I can connect them with anybody. And it's really, like for me, I think networking is just so important when you're trying to grow your career, and that's what PharmAffinity is all about. It's about building that network.
Yeah, I love that, and I'll link that in the descriptions for this episode as well. So I think people should definitely go visit that. I think one of the reasons why I created this platform as well is actually to share different stories, different experiences, different cases of best practice potentially as well, depending on where the conversation goes. And actually, as you mentioned, it's hard to sometimes even know what's going on in your own company, let alone other companies in industry. So actually, if you can create something that brings people together, can talk about a common goal, etc. I think that's a great thing as well. So I guess who's your is it just medical or commercial as well, or I guess is there a specific
Yeah,
audience you have in mind there?
just anybody really.
Hmm.
So we've had speakers who have, from the VP of compliance for Europe. We've had him come in as a speaker. We've had someone who was a commercial lead. We've had a few commercial leads actually. We've had market access, we've had global market access come in and speak about that. We've had people from so many different departments at various levels within industry coming in at our networking events just to talk to these people and to help them, which is just really nice.
So just to close, and I didn't warn you about this. If you don't have an answer, you don't have an answer. So yeah, just to close, is there any specific, let's say, mantra or something you go by, to kind of like that brings kind of clarity in your life in terms of what you do, whether that's personally or professional, that you think would be useful to share with people?
Oh, a mantra. Okay, so I have a number of different mantras.
Okay, cool. What,
um,
give me your top three then. Go on.
so I guess one of the ones that I like to do, um, quite well, I probably don't do that as often as I'd like to now, but when I was a lot younger, it was about being successful, right? Just telling myself that I am successful. Not that I want to be successful, but I am. Like
Mm,
in this moment, I am successful. And that was the mindset that I wanted to kind of have. I didn't want to kind of think, oh, in the future I will be successful and not really think about the now. So one of the things that I did was, yeah, when I was younger, a lot of the time I told myself, I am successful. And I tried to remember and think about all the things that I had achieved and that I'd done to be successful. Um, and then I guess the
I guess
other one
I guess
is,
before you go on to your next one, actually, yeah, I think
yeah.
that's probably really important to reflect on that as well, because as you mentioned in our working lives as well, like you're kind of just in task, you're going from one thing to the next, and actually you don't take note and time to reflect on actually some of the things you have achieved, and I think that's important as well. To that kind of add-on you had to that mantra as well. So I think yeah, I just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, yeah. And I think particularly when you're younger as well, I think a lot
Mm,
of the time you think you're just thinking about the future and you're
mm,
not thinking about the now. And
mm,
then you miss out on all of that. And you're always thinking, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that, I'm going to be. And then you never have that feeling of satisfaction of actually achieving it because you're always going to be doing it. So I think trying to bring it back and say, no, this is what I am.
mm.
I am this, and then you can just embody it and be it, and it will just follow you through your journey. So yeah, but
Yeah.
then yeah, the second one is kindness. I think that just always thinking about what is the kind thing to do. And it can be difficult because we all have stresses, right? Sometimes
Mm,
we're put under so much pressure, and it can be hard to be kind. Something you might say something in the heat of the moment, or you might say something without really thinking about it. Um, but just always being kind, I think, is something that's really important for me.
Yeah, I love that. Nice. Do you have a third one, or should we call it two?
I probably do, but I can't think about it. I've just got there's so many things I
Yeah, yeah.
think that I try to like hone in on at different points of my life and in different situations. But I think those two, the being, I am successful and being in that moment and trying
Hmm.
to be kind to all of those around you is probably the two most important ones.
Yeah, I love that. And to be fair, you can embody them day to day, like hour to hour as well, in everything you do. So I think they're super practical. So I love both of them. I might steal them myself. So nice. Okay. Before we close, is there anything you wanted to cover that I haven't asked you, or do you want to ask me anything?
Well, what has your experience been of working with medical?
Okay.
And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, how have you found that? And do you think some of the things that I've said resonates with your experience?
Yeah, good question actually. No one's asked me that before. Okay, I love that. So to be fair, it's ranged from when I was starting out in my career, when I was still understanding what the industry was, as to I was kind of coming into let's say what was already kind of happening at that point, and almost that was my understanding of how things were, which were very siloed back then. And it was kind of like, okay, the medical function is there to just sign off materials, let's say. So that's kind of what I came into, and so that's what I understood and embodied for the early part of my career. I think as I grew into different roles, understood that I could kind of change things. I can be a bit more confident about making my own decisions of how I want to do things. Um, and grew like relationships with my medical counterparts to then work with them much more closer. So my best experiences were when I moved from, I guess, a junior marketer into a senior brand manager role, where it was a very small therapy area in dermatology, and essentially the team was. I was basically the only commercial person for that brand, and then there was one medical person. My first task was to create a strategy, and I was like, I don't know how to create a strategy. This is what's going on. Um, and me and my medical counterpart pretty much just worked together from creating a strategy together all the way through to then implementing that strategy as well. And those were some of my best experiences that I had. And so actually that was a fun time. And then moving forwards after that as well, I kind of just embodied that because actually I'd had both experiences of actually what it's like when it's being siloed and then what it's like being together. So I think, yeah, I'd say it's definitely in a good place now. I've got lots of great contacts as well within the medical industry that I still kind of lean on when I'm doing work for multiple clients as well. But yeah, I think coming in early to the career, you kind of are susceptible to whatever it's like at that point. So you just got to understand that you can change things, but I think that only comes with experience. So
Yeah, and I do think things are changing because, like you said, I think historically medical had been seen as more of a support function rather than a function in its own right.
mm,
So I think now, as medical try to own their own strategy and do, deliver on their own deliverables, they're being seen slightly differently. But yeah, I do agree with you that things are changing.
yeah, and to the earlier point we had around kind of the whole marketing isn't just promotion as well. You can do
Yeah,
non-promotion there. There's a I think there's a growing understanding from definitely the circles that I speak to that actually the whole medical function, whether that's kind of head office medical affairs or MSLs, etc. Like that should be a major part of anything that the company does in terms of activating a brand strategy, etc. as well. So there's growing importance, and I'm seeing that kind of come through also in the numbers of people physically that are in some of these
yeah.
roles as well versus let's say brand managers, etc. as well. So yeah, I'm kind of glad to see that as well because that will hopefully then also shape better content, which is the area that I love talking about and working in as well. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to see going forward, more of that.
Oh, great. And I have one more question. It's about the mantra actually. I'd love to hear if you have a mantra.
Oh, okay. Yes, I do. It's actually, is that mirrored? I can't tell. It's that
No,
one
no, I
behind
can see
me.
it.
It's
Well,
you
it's
versus you.
okay. I
So
like that.
this is kind of like almost removing the whole idea of like comparing yourself with others.
Yes.
So this is about me just improving myself. So being that 1% better the next day. And just thinking about actually like what can I do to be better and learning from each of that. And that's kind of like actually my opening episode of this podcast as well, which when I started at the start of the year was actually I had an idea of what I wanted it to look like. But in the end, I'm just going to build it as I go and try and improve one thing, whether that's in an edit, whether that's in how I do things, etc. as well. And I kind of carry that into my daily life, whether that's in the work I do, whether that's in kind of fitness, which I'm also into as well, which is kind of why that image is what it is. So yeah, it's you versus you, or it's me versus me. I couldn't find any it's me versus me, so I had to be a you versus you on there.
No, I love it. I love it. I think that's really good. I think that's really important as well because a lot of the time, particularly with social media, everyone sees what everyone else is doing, and
Mm,
immediately you compare yourself to it and you
mm.
think, oh, why am I not there yet? And you will achieve what you need to achieve in your own time. It is you versus you or me versus me. But I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah, awesome. Love that. Okay, well, let's close. I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so glad you did. Hopefully, you enjoyed the conversation.
I did, absolutely. Yes, thank you so much for having me.
So, there you have it. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you resonated with anything that we talked about today or have any questions, please get in touch. All of the details will be in the show notes. To get alerted when the next episode is out, make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or the follow button on Spotify. And that's it. See you next time.